Got it.
All right, so let me just give a little background to you guys. As Miss Gaskins already said, Miss Vest was Zach's teacher when he was at what was then Athens Junior High, now Athens City Middle. And then when Zach was at McMinn, I was his physics teacher. And we have remained friends since then. His childhood home was in the same neighborhood where my mom now lives. So we have several connections. So we've talked about how he's going to do this. We're just going to turn him loose. He's going to tell you about his background and then the things he's done. And if you guys have any questions, either just speak them. And if he can't hear you, I'll repeat them to him. And so I think we're ready to rock and roll, Zach. So you just take it away, buddy. Thank you.
Great. So hi everyone. I can't see you, but thank you for being here. I guess I should start by saying that I was born in Athens. I grew up between Athens and Sweetwater. I went through Ingleside, North City, junior high / middle school, and then went to McMinn, where I had the lovely teachers at McMinn, mostly. I always kind of felt like I was going to go somewhere else. I didn't know what that meant, or how that was going to manifest itself, but I always felt like I was going to go somewhere else after high school. And I sort of was very lucky early on. I would say around the 9th grade is when I realized that I loved telling visual stories. And that sort of the way that manifested itself was in the 9th grade. We had Cougar TV at the junior high, where it was a bi-weekly news show where we would, update students on the news of the school, but then we would also do skits and other dumb exercises that we somehow got away with that were just expressions of creativity. And it was in that sort of like working with my friends to tell funny stories or to do things that we thought were funny that I found that I really enjoyed doing that. I really enjoyed making people laugh. I really enjoyed making people feel something. And that sort of just started my brain on this journey of like, I like to tell stories. I like to entertain. I like to get a reaction. So basically from that point on, I felt like I wanted to do something like that. And I think throughout high school, it sort of crystallized into, I want to work in movies because I love movies and I love how people talk about them and how they create a sense of community and how you can sort of create your own world and all that. So I was pretty lucky in knowing what I wanted to do. So when it came time to apply to college, I don't recommend this, but I only applied to 2 places. Okay, so I should backtrack. I visited USC, University of Southern California, at some point in my high school life. And I knew that was where I was going to go to college because it was just like the best film program that existed in my mind. And a lot of famous people had come from that program, and I was very excited about that. But my mom requested that I stay on the same side of the country as her. So I was like, all right, fine. I'll go to NYU. So I ended up only applying to New York University and Middle Tennessee State University. So it's a very clear fork in the road of my life, applying to literally creating a fork in the road for myself, where I was either going to go to New York or I was going to go to Murfreesboro. And that was kind of it. But I was dead set on going to NYU. And like I said, I don't recommend that. I think that you should apply to many places and give yourself lots of options. But I was lucky enough to be accepted into the program, the film program there. And I was lucky enough to have parents who supported me and who wanted me to do the things that I felt moved to do. And that meant emotionally and also financially. Obviously, they were very supportive and were willing to make the sacrifices that they had to get me there. So once I got to film school at New York University, and I met a collection of people who were sort of, I use the term broken in the same way that I am. They were just, it was finally meeting a group of people that see the world the way that you do and process things the same way that you do. And it makes you feel less strange or less I don't know, like less alone in the world once you sort of find your community. And I think that that's really important. And that's not to diminish where I came from or the friends that I was surrounded with or anything like that, because I keep in touch with a lot of people that I grew up with, and I do think that they were really important in my creative process and sort of building my confidence in being a storyteller. But there is sort of a difference when you get to a place where that's what people are most passionate about in their lives. You know, when you sit when you sit at lunch and all you talk about is movies, like literally, like all you talk about is movies for 4 years. That was my college experience. And I think that that really shaped and honed a lot of what my passion was into a clear, sharp place that could sort of navigate through the world. So I went through NYU, the film school. Through the film school, I was able to get an internship at HBO Sports, where I ended up working in the documentary department. That led to a full-time job there, where I worked with a small documentary group for several years, which was great. That was like learning a whole new process of how to tell stories in a different way in the film space. And on the side, I kept doing my own script work. I worked with someone as sort of a writing assistant for several years. So there was about a 4-year period where I would work my full-time job at the documentary group, and then I would take a subway to a small Brooklyn workspace and work till around 11 or midnight at night and then go home. So I was working 16-hour days for about 4 years. And then on the weekends, I would do script stuff as well, because it was what I wanted to do. And it's what is required to get where you want to go, which is, there's no shortcut. It's working really hard and being really frustrated with your lack of progress until you realize that you've been making progress the whole time. And it was through all of that work that I sort of gained the confidence to start creating work on my own. And I was lucky enough to have a friend from film school. His name was Skip Bronke, who he produced my senior thesis film, which, trivia, was a bank heist that I shot in Athens. That was my senior thesis film. He produced that film, and we realized that we were sort of creative soulmates and that we needed to work together. And so we said, okay, we should do this professionally. We should figure out a way to work together. That was 2007. Cut to 2015, when I've been in New York the whole time working on documentaries. He's been in San Francisco working at Facebook and Pinterest, doing sort of commercial work with them. And he called me one day and he said, a year from now, I'm going to quit my job and we're going to start a production company together.
Wow.
And I said, okay, I will also quit my job and I will do that with you. And so we had sort of saved money in that period of time, the whole time that we'd been apart and sort of working on our own separate things. And we had enough money to sort of give ourselves 6 months as a company and sort of invest in one major project. And so during that time of being apart from each other, but wanting to work together, I was riding the subway one day and I saw everyone in the subway car wearing headphones and listening. And I had this epiphany of, oh, that's an audience. We should create something for the sound space because everybody's got headphones on and everybody's listening to something and everyone's commuting here in New York. This is specific, but I extrapolated that to the world is probably listening to stuff right now. Why don't we try that? And that sort of started this thought in my head of doing a podcast, sort of a fictional podcast, that eventually led to Limetown, which Skip and I started having lots of conversations about what it could be, what it is, what the story is. I wrote a script in the winter of 2013. We recorded it in 2014. We released it late in 2015 after no one wanted to distribute it or knew what to do with it. We had created the pilot episode of Limetown, and tried to sell it and try to get people to pay attention to it, and no one did. So we decided to release it on our own in August of 2015 when we officially became a company, and put it out into the world to see if anyone would care. We didn't think anyone would care. And then suddenly lots of people cared, sort of like immediately. And we had to create the rest of the season in real time from August 2015 through December 2015. We wrote, recorded, and edited every other episode in that 4-month span. And also I got married somewhere in there. It was a whole weird time in my life. But anyway, that became the #1 podcast on iTunes for several weeks. It became a very huge deal for us. It instantly raised our profile as creators, and it allowed us to get agents and representation, which allowed us to get the Limetown TV show and the book deal. And then out of that, we also created 36 Questions, the musical, starring Jonathan Groff from Frozen and Mindhunter, and he's great. But that we were only able to do that because of Limetown. And then we did the TV show, and then now we did Shipworm, which is being adapted into a movie now, hopefully. And there's lots of other things, but that's sort of the basic thrust of my life, getting me to where I am now. So that's who I am and all that. So now we can open it up to a conversation. If anything is interesting or you want to talk more about anything within that.
Awesome. Well,
it was really good how like your idea started so small of what like how it wasn't so clear, and getting clearer the more steps you took where you knew it was the right path, but where you can't see the future yet, and how everything from the Limetown to the TV show and stuff, you thought like some people wouldn't care, and the more people that cared, the more it evolved, and the better and bigger the idea became and affected everyone in the world.
Yeah, I think the lesson there, and again, I think as I've gotten older, I've realized how foolishly I've lived a lot of my life up to this point, and maybe not foolishly, but sort of like I've been very fearless in my creative choices, or even in my big life choices. Like moving to New York to go to film school was the easiest choice of my life. And I think a smarter, more careful person would have considered all of those life-changing impacts and what it all means. But um, I think that having confidence in yourself and your ideas really is the heart of all of this. Like if you don't believe in what you're doing, no one will believe in what you're doing. And so you kind of have to have that fundamental understanding of yourself and what you're capable of, and have confidence in your ideas. And I think that Limetown came from a place of like, I think there is an interest and a void for a story here. Now let's find the best story possible. And that did take time. It wasn't like an instant, like you said, it was several steps along the way. And if you ask me where ideas come from, I'm not going to have a good answer for you. I have no idea. Ideas just come, and they're sort of like little miracles that drop from the sky. They're like, ah, thank you. And then they either grow and become something, or they grow and don't become anything. There's lots of things that I've thought that don't work. But Limetown was an example of something that I really believed in, that was lucky enough to catch on with a lot of people, and therefore gives me more confidence going forward in whatever my dumb idea is at the time. So I think that's the most important thing, is you believing in yourself and your ideas first and foremost, before anyone else does. You don't need outside validation from the beginning, is hopefully what I can impart as any sort of wisdom out of that.
So it was, I didn't realize that you had to work on those episodes in real time. Like because I was one of the listeners like, dang it, when's the next one coming?
Yeah, it was all real time. It was because what happened was we had the first episode, and I had written the second episode, and we kind of had an outline for where the season went, but we couldn't invest all of our money into something that no one was going to listen to. So as soon as it started catching on, that's when we as a production company said, okay, we should use the money that we have saved to build out this podcast and make it the best thing that it possibly can be. And like I said, we gave ourselves 6 months as a company. So it was like, this is it. We're just going all in to see how this goes. And now it's been 6 years, 6+ years as a company. So I feel like we made the right choice. But those 4 months were the craziest 4 months of my life, bar none. Like doing that in real time, getting married, like handling all the, because what happens when you have something that is successful like that is everyone in the world wants to talk to you, or get in business with you, or figure out a way to sort of like get into your life. And it's really intoxicating. You can see why people who have any amount of success get lost in it, and maybe don't have continued success, because it's really easy to just fall in love with everything nice that everyone's telling you. And what you have to learn is to sort of block the noise and do the work. And that's the most important thing. Like, it's every job is just getting you to the next job, and you have to keep working. You have to do the work to get more work, and everything else is just a distraction. And that's a lesson that you have to sort of learn on your own. But I think if you go into it with that mindset of work begets work, and the work is the most important thing, that it's helpful.
Yes.
That was the lesson I was hearing, was that work ethic is also what this is all about. Not
Yes.
only taking risks and having confidence, but you put in a ridiculous amount of work to make all this happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's, like I said, there's no easy way to do this. you have to be very passionate. You have to be willing to make a lot of sacrifices. But it also means that part of your job is consuming the material you love. So if you want to be a novelist, you should read all the time. If you want to make movies, you should watch a lot of movies. If you want to make TV, you should watch a lot of TV. And so that's a great part of this life is that all the things that you love and are entertained by are sort of instructional in the work that you do. And there's no other way to get that information than to consume the things that you love and sort of create your own version of it. But it is a lot of work, and it is a lot of doing work when you don't want to do work. And it's also about learning your process and how you work and what you have to forgive yourself for. For example, I've learned that a lot of my writing process is not writing. It used to be that I would stress myself out because I couldn't just sit down and write something. I had to take time to process it, and it would really stress me out and really create tension with whatever deadlines I was working on or whatever. But what I've learned is, like, if I'm not ready to write, it's not going to happen. So I need to give myself the time to think about an idea and have it grow organically until I get to a place of like, okay, now it can happen. And now that I understand that part of my process, when I actually do write, I write pretty fast. And I also write material that doesn't require a lot of reworking, unless there's sort of like a fundamental problem with what I'm doing. But what I'm saying is, once I commit myself to the page, it's pretty close to what the end result is in a lot of my experience. And that's because I've given myself the time to sort of do the revisions in my head before I sat down to write. And I think that that's pretty unusual. I think that a lot of writers will say that you need to write 4 hours a day and then go swimming and then rewrite, like make it sort of a militaristic effort. And maybe that works, and maybe that's great, and maybe that kind of discipline is what you need. But I think that there's a lot of ways to be a successful writer. And sometimes that means giving yourself a break. And sometimes that means allowing your brain to sort of wander around and find the dark corners where the most interesting stuff is. And so I think because of how some writers talk about writing, it can be a real detriment to people getting into writing. It can feel like a barrier that if you're like, I can't sit down and write 4 hours a day, that just doesn't work for me, and I create bad work, or that seems like an overwhelming thing to ask myself to do every day. And I don't think that that is what writing is, or I don't think that that is the way that it has to be. If it works for you, great. All I'm saying is, whatever your process is, that's your process. If you create a product at the end of the day, you are a successful writer. and know that most people don't have a product at the end of the day. And so I think whatever gets you there is the way that you need to understand yourself and forgive yourself if that's your process, So anyway, I'm rambling. That was just sort of a mini rant.
Not rambling at all.
Jump in though, you said something earlier. You gave yourself permission to think beyond the norm into something that had not been done, and then go invent it. And you gave yourself the creative license to go do that thing. And then explore that space. Is this something that can grow into an idea, and then to nurture it and give it time to evolve? So many people wouldn't have taken that courageous step. So to your credit, that was huge. And I to all of the young ones who will hear this podcast, that's a big takeaway right there, is giving yourself permission to think beyond what you see as these are the genres in which I can plug in. That may not be the right way. You created a whole new avenue for expression in what you were doing based on the needs of the moment. And I love that.
Yeah, and I'm going to insert something. I am not missing the irony here. They've both talked about seeing the future. So, I'm not gonna spoil anything for them, but they've got to listen to the podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, like I said, I think a lot of the credit of who I am as a person and the choices that I make is because I had wonderful parents and I had a wonderful foundation to be fearless. Like I had a mother who at no point questioned anything that I ever did as long as it wasn't hurting someone. Like if I was like, Mom, I want to do this crazy thing, she'd be like, great, how do we do that? How do I support that? And I think it just created an atmosphere from very early on in my life that I can be fearless and that I can fail and it's okay. And I understand that is a very lucky and privileged experience to have. I was very lucky to have that. A lot of people don't have that. But I do think that the fear of failing cripples so many people before they even start. And I think failure is just it is just another opportunity to do something else. Like, okay, that didn't work. What do we do now? What do we do now? What do we do now? And you constantly evolve and understand why something failed. Understanding why something failed is more important than why something succeeded in a lot of ways, because we have had a lot of failures, and through all of them, I think that each succeeding project has gotten better or stronger or smarter or has evolved in a way that I think is more interesting because of the way that we have failed in other ways. And so I just think that failure or publicly failing is really the worst thing for a creative person to put emphasis on or to allow to be a barrier in your life, because I think that failure is really important, because I think when you start writing or when you start being creative at all, you're going to be disappointed in yourself because you're comparing yourself to what you love. You're comparing yourself to the people who are professionals who you admire, people who have dedicated themselves to the craft and have created wonderful things through hard work and all the things that I've talked about. You're comparing yourself to them and you're just a baby. You don't know what you're doing yet. But if you have good taste, if you like things that you think are successful and you understand why they are, that's how you start that process. And so all of those many failures of not living up to whatever standard you're setting for yourself is how you grow and how you get better. And eventually one day you'll be like, there's my voice. I found it. That's, now I'm writing the things that I feel and that I think. And I think that I just think that's what you have to do. You have to just eat it and go. it's the eating your vegetables of the creative world. That's what failure is.
I want that on for my classroom.
Yeah,
I didn't.
and she wants that on a poster in her classroom.
Yeah. There you go.
I kind of understand where you talk about failure, how some people don't even start because of the fear of failure. And I agree with you, because it's like failure are the experiments and achievements of success, because not only do you experiment, but you learn from the failures to not only reevaluate, but revise it to make it become successful. And so my question is to you is, despite being very successful like you are today and having all these accomplishments to your name and stuff, and your mom wanting you close by when you went to college, do you regret not going to UCS and not being able to go to there, and
Yeah,
regret not
No, I don't regret it at all, because NYU is so USC and NYU are considered the two best film schools in America. And depending on if you are live in New York or LA, they will tell you they are number one. It's like a back and forth, whatever. It's like, so it was a very great school. And again, the community that I found at NYU was the most important thing of all of it. Just finding people who thought and felt like me. And also, finding people that I still work with today. Like Skip was a guy that I met at NYU. And so I don't regret that at all. I think it worked out beautifully. And I lived in New York, basically for 15, 16 years, until recently. So I loved my time in New York. And I think that it was really important for me to become who I am now, to end up there and sort of live in that place. And possibly that happens at USC, but at no point am I thinking like, oh man, I made the wrong choice here. Like, no, I needed to come to New York. I needed to do the things that I did in order to be who I am. And again, that could have happened anywhere, I guess, but I don't regret the path that I took to get here.
Well, like, what I want to know is like, you took so many small ideas and turned them into big ones, and not only, like you said, about the community, wanting, finding people that thinks like you, that basically knows your way of everything around you, who are like you, is a really important part of it, because you found people who have the same interests as you, think the same way as you. So I would love that, what you said about that, because it's a really important thing to find people that's like you, to understand you.
For sure. And high school was high school is a weird time. It's just like, it is, there's no way around it. It's just like, everything's weird. There's a lot of social pressures, your body's changing, all of those fun things. You're not even, you're like sort of the very early version of who you're going to be in the future. And I think that judging yourself too harshly at any point, or thinking that this is what life is at any point, can be really destructive or really distracting in a weird way. And I think even when you're in college, you're still not really a person yet. But I guess what I'm saying is like, it is important at every step to find your community and find the people who are supportive for you at that time. And I think that sometimes that doesn't happen in high school. Sometimes that happens later. Sometimes it happens later than that. But I was lucky to find it because I knew what I was passionate about, and I sought out the world that supported that passion. And I think that, sometimes a lot of people aren't so lucky to know what they want to do or what they want to be in life. And so sometimes that makes it hard to find the right people who support that. But speaking as a creative, as we are talking as writers here, I do think that it is going to be very beneficial if you pursue the writing course, to find people who think like you and have the same thoughts as you and have the same dumb conversations as you. Because I think about how much time in my 4 years at NYU was just talking about movies, like I said, and TV shows. And it's like, I think on the outside looking in, that would be an insane amount of wasted time. But for me, it was really important. It shaped what I became as a storyteller, what I valued. And like, when you have that conversation of like, I like this, no, I like this, or I like this, or we both like this, we both didn't like this. I think all of that is sort of information that shapes what you are as a storyteller.
Well, and also I want to say, like, I love how you took everything in stride, because when you started working on the other Liontown podcast within that short amount of time frame, where you also got married and stuff, like, you took everything in stride and just kept pushing forward and not backing down from anything. So So like, I really admire that, because you can't just stop at a specific time. You just have to keep on going through anything and everything.
So Zach has this vision, and he always has had, because sitting here listening, I'm having all these flashback memories of Zach as a freshman in high school. And he talked to me, we had conversations, lots of conversations about movies. And I can remember him telling me that he loved Jeffrey Rush. And I thought, that is so weird for a freshman in high school to like Jeffrey Rush, you know, but it all makes sense because he had good taste back then and was all about films and movies even back then, and pressured me to show films and movies in class. And I and I showed films and movies in my class because I was dumb and didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, put it together. But yeah, he's had that vision from, you know, since I knew him as a kid. He was all about the movies.
Yeah, that's the really important thing, that you have the vision right in front of you, so
Yeah.
you know what you gotta do
And then
to
go
get
for
that.
it. Yeah. And he went for it.
Yeah, and to what you're saying, like the reason you don't stop is because as soon as you see that you're gaining traction or getting success is when you dig in even more, because it's more like I'm here. I've been working all this time for this, and now it's here. And there's no way I'm going to screw this up or drop the ball because I didn't work hard enough or that I didn't do enough on my side. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But it's not going to be because I didn't try, you know. And I think that is sort of, if I can sort of give like a manifesto of all of this, it's like you gotta go for it, you know. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But don't let it be because you didn't go for it, you know.
That's a great piece of advice.
Thank you for
Yeah.
being so candid about the journey, because you as a creator, as a creative spirit, have not held back on how you felt about the journey. And I think that's what the next generation of creative spirits need to hear. They need to hear you talking about it as a real person, and it's not a perfect journey, but it was your journey and you made it work. And that's
Yeah.
what, so thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. And no, it's not a perfect journey. It's there's a lot that you don't see. So when you see anyone that's had any amount of success, or you think like, oh man, where did that come from? That came from a really hard, dark series of choices that you had to make along the way. But ultimately it's I mean, for me, if I wasn't doing this as a career, I would be doing this as a hobby. And what I mean to say is I would be doing this no matter what. If I was working at the post office or I was working at the grocery store, I would also be doing this. So I'm the luckiest person in the world because people are foolish enough to pay me to do this. And so I'm able to take what I love and what I have to do and have made it my life. And I think if you feel that in yourself, if you feel like you have to do this thing, then you owe it to yourself to do everything you can to make it work no matter what. Because I think that's how you end up being the most unhappy person in the world is if you have regrets about not following your passions or whatever your creative impulses are. Because those are sort of the deep fundamental parts of yourself manifesting in a way that you are lucky enough to understand. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people don't know what they're supposed to be doing. But if you do, you have to follow it until you can. And that's it.
Hey, I wanted you to speak to something. I am so very impressed personally with how very different the three projects
Yeah.
have been. So and I don't know, you may have to explain a little bit how they are different. You know, like Limetown was different in and of itself because, you know, it's not your traditional podcast.
Right.
I think I've heard you speak to how you and your dad used to listen to the old radio series and those kinds of things. But then your other two are each one so individual. So can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for those, I mean, that they are so different is intentional.
Yeah,
And that they are their own thing is sort of why they are created, because it was like during Limetown, during that crazy 4-month stretch, I remember Skip coming to me and saying like, we should do a podcast musical. And I was like, haha. And then he was like, no, I'm serious. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And he said, neither do I. Let's do it. And so like, that's kind of how 36 Questions started. And we were smart enough to know that we needed to work with people that knew how to write musicals. So it was, that one was more of us sort of like overseeing a production and sort of becoming showrunners, and other people wrote 36 Questions and other people directed 36 Questions, but we were there hands-on the entire time, building that out and overseeing it and giving creative oversight and doing all of the things that I think are our strengths as far as that goes. And so that was that. And then Shipworm came because early on, again, back during Limetown, I was like, we should, because everything was serialized and everything continues to be serialized in the podcasting space. Why can't you make a feature film in the audio form? And that was like, oh, we should do something like that. And that took 5 more years until we found the right story and the right time and all those things to do that. But it was again sort of like a what is something that no one is doing? What is something new? What is something unexpected? Because podcasting is, you know, audio storytelling is like the oldest form of mass entertainment that exists, but podcasting is a relatively new approach to entertainment. And there's still a lot of things to be figured out, and there's still a lot of ways to do new things in the space. And so that was sort of, as a company, how we wanted to approach each project, is like, what is a new thing? What is something that people aren't doing? And how can we create something there that's new? So Shipworm became our first audio film. And that again, like, now I have written the script to be a film adaptation that's hopefully moving forward. But I think because we try to find these new things, we are able to find success in other ways. Like 36 Questions is being adapted into a movie for Netflix, and hopefully Shipworm will be adapted somewhere in the next year or so. We're going to learn more about that. But because they're so different and because they stand out, it allows us to get our feet into other forms of entertainment. We've just been lucky that way.
well, I would argue you've been lucky, yes, but to me, it just speaks to the level of creativity. I'm always making musical connections, but for me, it's like, if there is an artist who releases a new album and every song sounds basically the same, you know, but the ones who stand out are the ones who have that ability to basically morph into, oh, well, this sounds like an entirely different genre almost, you know, like you listen to the album and you're hearing all these different things that don't sound repetitive. And, you know, I just think in any creative realm, that is what sets you apart. You know, you don't get stuck in a lane and wear it out, basically, creatively. So
Right.
that's awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Always playing at the boundaries. and
Yeah.
moving up into the boundaries of things.
Yeah, pushing the envelope, hitting the boundaries. Yeah. Anybody got any more questions,
I'm out.
comments?
How old is the baby?
He will be 3 in March.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, he currently has a cold, which means that I will have a cold next day or two.
Yeah.
So that's fun, but otherwise doing great and is a complete psycho, as all 2.5-year-olds are. But it's great.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'm not going to sign out yet, but we'll stop the recording. But just thank you so very much for doing this. And I can't wait for us to share it with a bunch of other folks.
Yes.
It's just awesome. So